Hi, this is Brian with a quick review of the WES case you just did, the April 29th, 2010 event. I wanted to go over a few things and perhaps give you a few takeaway points to think about. Here's what actually happened. You can see there were several warnings issued through the period, and this actually goes a little bit beyond the period of the WES case as well. But majority severe thunderstorm warnings, but we did issue a few tornado warnings as well. I'm not sure if you personally did for the WES case, but the warning operators on that day did. You can notice vast majority of the reports were for hail at this time. It wasn't a bad environment for wind either, but we didn't get any specific reports of wind damage or strong winds, even with some of those what looked to be strong RFD signatures. The hail was as large as golf ball sized. We had several reports of golf ball sized hail, at least in and near the area. And based on the storm structure, the rotation strength in the mid-levels, the B-weirs that were occasionally present, or at least weak echo regions, it could have seen some larger hail that just didn't get reported. Just something to keep in mind. Now, there was one tornado. It was a brief tornado up in northern Washington County. I remember this one well because it was a storm I was warning for. I'm not afraid to admit that, even though it was a real pain and one that annoys me to this day. It was an EF0. It lasted less than 30 seconds, but several chasers were on that storm, and they were able to report it into us. Now we'll walk through an animated GIF of the event. We'll go through it several times. Notice that the storms, they moved over a lot of the similar areas. They pushed out outflow boundaries to the northwest. There were no boundaries visible coming out of the southern flank, except for maybe a weak one there. And at that location, they were a little farther from the radar and maybe weren't as easy to see. But there were some boundaries lingering around in the area due to previous convection. One thing to notice is that we didn't do the best job as far as picking up on the strong deviant right motion that some of these storms exhibited once they really got rooted and really took strength as a right mover. There were also a couple of left movers that shot off and produced some hail. Looks like those were handled pretty well. But in the end, you got to remember that with these hard right movers, we kind of have to plan ahead for that. And it can be tricky sometimes to figure when they're going to do it and when they're not. But this was definitely a case where they turned hard right. We'll walk through the warnings as well as reflectivity and storm relative velocity, one more time. That the storm that produced the tornado didn't really have an outstanding velocity signature, but it was even more interesting an event just with that alone. I think it's worth looking a little bit closer at the deviant storm motion compared to the warning polygons that were drawn, and I guess I feel like I can do this because they're my polygons that I drew. I really should have gone a little farther to the right, added some extra room, especially as at least two of these storms did become firmly rooted in the boundary layer with strong deviant motion and the propagation to the right of the mean vector. If you don't have bunkers storm motion overlaid on your warning screen, strongly recommended. I know George has pointed that out several times. But if we watch the way it goes, you can see that the subsequent warnings were always drawn with more right flanking, and even this subsequent warning should have been drawn with a little more room on the right. I can go ahead and again say that now, but if we go one step further, you can see by the time the tornado warning is issued, there's probably some very strong RFD winds that are sneaking out of that box there. Also, you'll notice we did issue the Republic tornado warning initially with plenty of room on the southern flank, and that one took a very hard right. Nice rotation with that storm, and it snuck out of the warning as well. You can also see that little gust front boundary pushing out of there. Again, we didn't have any severe wind reports along these RFDs, but they did exhibit some decent signatures from time to time. So let's talk about our little tornado there. To tour or not to tour in Washington County? Well, there were reasons for each. As you've seen, it was a quality supercell. We had strong low-level wind shear present. We had chaser reports and live video at the time of a well-developed storm structure. There was persistent rotation, although I will say it was fairly weak, and Funnel cloud was reported briefly, if I remember right. It was likely near a frontal boundary, or at least a remnant outflow from a previous storm that had moved through. There were a couple of weak boundaries in the area. So those are reasons that you might consider issuing a tornado warning. Reasons not to, the LCL was the main reason. Cloud bases were really very high. It wasn't the most favorable environment as far as spinning up tornadoes. The chaser reports in the live video indicated that high cloud base, and they also reported only weak rotation. The one funnel cloud was brief, at least the initial funnel cloud, and there wasn't much to it. And frankly, on radar, as you saw, the velocity signature wasn't outstanding, but the storm structure, the reflectivity, really looked nice. So, I mean, it's a tough decision. In the end, this is what happened. This is the tornado. You can just see a little tiny dust whirl right there. Not impressive. This is hardly a funnel cloud so much as it's just a further lowering of the wall cloud, and you can see the bases are, the actual cloud bases are quite high, and then your wall cloud a little bit lower, obviously. But, it wasn't impressive. It was in an open field. It lasted 30 seconds or less, according to the people who saw it. But, if there had been a house there, it would have done a little bit of damage. So, it's a tough one. The other storm back in Republic County honestly looked quite a bit better, in my opinion. It was a quality supercell, reasons for issuing a TOR anyway. A great storm structure, strong rotational signature on radar. It again was near a boundary, and also at this time you had a fact that a previous storm had produced a brief tornado, so maybe your mindset has changed a little bit. But again, reasons not to issue tornado warning on this: you have a high LCL, maybe it's behind a boundary, a little bit elevated, and also the previous tornado was very weak. But in the end, that Republic County storm, again, in my opinion, looked very nice on radar. From a tornado potential perspective, it's just a matter of figuring all of that in with the environment and spotter reports and what you're going to do. If I remember right, also, it didn't help that there were the bulk of the chasers were focused on that Washington County storm and weren't out in Republic County, so we didn't quite have the report density that we'd had on the first one. As far as an overview with maybe a few takeaway points, I hit this already, but on favored right mover days, always plan for a right turn. Give yourself a little extra buffer down there. And we even did on one or two of those storms, and it still caught up to us. It turned so hard to the right of the mean wind. Some tips for doing that: always track the updraft of a supercell. Anticipate the future updraft in terms of occlusion and propagation. That's a lot of environment that goes into that, but it's something that we can do a lot of times. Also, if a storm is in the process of quote turning, a recent track may be more accurate than tracking the storm for, say, the past 30 minutes in WarnGen. If you do the last 10 minutes instead of the last 30 minutes, it may grab that more recent storm motion as opposed to something a little more down the middle and not so much to the right. Also, these storms did appear to have a severe left split early on as well, and looked like a pretty healthy storm that produced some nice hail. Another thing that I caught myself doing when reviewing my performance in this was that we can't wait till the last minute to issue a new warning. So when the storm is about to move out of the polygon, or when the polygon's about to expire, the media folks and the EMs, they're out there. Everyone else is wondering, can I come out of my basement? Is now the time or not? So you've got to be cognizant of giving a little lead time on the next warning downstream as well. Hazards on this day: obviously it was a good day for hail, but let's go in a little deeper. And how do you feel your warnings performed regarding hail size? We've had the giant hail study here locally. We've had several studies on smaller hail sizes, quarters, and golf balls as well. The fact of the matter is that well-developed supercells, which at least two of these were, often have golf ball size hail and larger. So hopefully we're putting in at least golf balls. And again, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some larger hail in there. We just didn't get the reports of it. Again, there were no wind reports through this period, despite some fairly favorable conditions. Had those high LCLs, decent dew point depressions at the surface, and some fairly good radar signatures on the RFD, a couple of those storms. Assessing tornado potential was tough. We talked about this already. It was an interesting combination of both favorable and unfavorable conditions. You had the high LCLs, but you had great wind shear. It seemed like it was always, it could go this way, it could go that way. In the end, again, we had the one brief, weak tornado, and that's where decision-making comes into effect. It just wasn't a perfect yes or no decision for a tornado warning, even with that brief one. By the time the tornado warning was out, the tornadoes were over and we didn't have any more. So that's an interesting thing to consider. On the other hand, if I can think to a mentality of being in that position, if it did it once, there's a decent chance it'll do it again, right? So it's very difficult decision making in this one. You can self-evaluate your own performance and think about what you would do in that situation if you could do it again. But again, even the tornado that developed was very weak and short-lived. A few of the ingredients were missing, but again, some of those days, the ingredients can be modified by storm scale features. And even with hindsight, right now I'm looking back at it, what I did, and it's not an easy decision. I don't know if I would do anything different. That's the end of the WES case. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for partaking, and hopefully it was a little extra review with the severe weather season coming up right around the corner before you know it.